I took note of that because none of the other leaders I've interviewed have made such a point about that. And I thought that was interesting because when I heard that you valued that so much, I thought, of course it's so important, but yet it's not talked about as much as it might have been, I've thought.
Well, for example, I found myself in situations where I may have been the only woman in a group of professional men. Like at the DOT, MnDOT, I was worked with 15 engineers that traveled around the state of Minnesota looking and having meetings, and it was critical that I had good relationships with them because the work that I was doing was working with small businesses on large MnDOT contracts. Now that does not seem like the favorite work that these large contractors like. On the other hand, if you have a very good relationship with people, no matter whether they like the work that you're doing or not, you can agree to disagree and still have respect for each other. And I think that's how I would sum it up.
That's very interesting. I want to have you just quickly tell us your path. As you mentioned, the Department of Transportation. You were the chief. Give us your exact title, Sandy.
Actually, I was the director of the Women and Minority Business Enterprise program there, and then got promoted to be the director of administration for the Metro Division. And so, in fact, had worked with small businesses for about 6-7 years, and then moved into administration, where we consolidated 1,500 people around the Metro into one department. And that was a really big step for people, and we had lots of disagreement, lots of conflict about it, but with those relationships we could see our way through to an agreement of having people come together. It worked very well, as a matter of fact.
And you were there from '84 to '97.
That's exactly right.
And then took the job
That's
at the Hennepin County government as our chief administrator.
Let me just give you a little bit of, there's a couple of different steps there. When I was I was at MnDOT for almost 14 years, but in my 12th, almost 13th year, I did get a Bush Fellowship. Went off to the Kennedy School for 11 months, and then came back.
Stayed though with the department, correct?
Stayed with the department, who was so wonderful in giving me a leave and then, allowing me to come back. And then I looked around and I did not see the job that was perfect for me at that point. So it's so interesting. Again, I met with some Bush Fellows, and you never want to turn down information. You always want to keep your ear to the ground. I met some new Bush Fellows that were going into the program. One was coming from Hennepin County and said, I think the county administrator is going to be hiring a deputy county administrator. And that really got my attention. And so I figured out who did I know that would know the county administrator, and made the connection and asked for some help to get introduced. And then I went in to see that person.
So you took the initiative.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I did go in and see the county administrator, then it was Jeff Spartz, and introduce myself. And 6 months later, after a very arduous process, I was hired as the deputy county administrator. Then, in about, I'd say 14 months, the CEO of the hospital, HCMC, was headhunted away to Kansas City. My boss went into HCMC as Jeff went into HCMC as the chief administrator of the hospital.
So that left his job open.
That left his job open. And I think this is typical of women, because it's like, okay, the job that you think you've wanted all of your life is open.
Suddenly appears.
Suddenly appears. And do you know that it took me some time to really say, yes, I want that job. I'm raising my hand and I want that job. And you have to do it. I mean, that was one of the hardest decisions that I ever made, because by that time I knew that the politics, and the big P politics as well as the small p politics, was pretty daunting in an organization like Hennepin County. But I have total respect for it. I have total respect for elected officials who put themselves out to get elected by the people and then do this very hard work with this large county of almost $2 billion and 1,100,000 constituents. But I did go for it.
In a nutshell, the things that you were overseeing when you were the administrator were as broad as the hospital system, HCMC, to poverty programs. Give us the kind of the range, Sandy.
It was such a breadth of different kinds of activities. I mean, we used to say that we would we fill potholes to brain surgery. I mean, it had that kind of span to it. But I will tell you that the county is huge, Hennepin County in particular. And I also, again, will repeat that there are excellent people there, excellent people working in the government, people at the elected, in elected offices that really care about this community. So we had 6 different areas that we were in charge of. One was transportation, and we took care of county roads. Another was the 26 libraries, and now, as everyone knows, Minneapolis and Hennepin County have merged their libraries. Another was the medical systems, HCMC. And then we had $500 million in what I would call the human services, and making sure that people in poverty had the kinds of resources in order to continue on. And we also had all of the not the judicial system. We worked with the district court, but we had all of the criminal and justice system behind the police in Minneapolis. Some departments were in the state, but unless you thought about it as a whole system, it didn't work really well. It really had to be orchestrated so they could move cases along and that people had the right to due process.
This job, I have to tell you, when I have interviewed people for 28 years and learned about their jobs, this job sounds to me like the most challenging, the most complex of, I'm very serious, of any that I have come across. How did you handle the stress, Sandy, and how did you handle having such a responsibility for these diverse arenas?
Well, I think one of the things, and this is as I think back on it, because I am now at the Minneapolis Foundation, and it was a very stressful job. I think that when you work for government, you are working in plain sight of all of the public. As a matter of fact, we used to have our county board meetings on every Tuesday, and then they'd be rerun during the week. So decisions or mistakes or whatever it was right there in front of everybody. There are a couple of things that I did. One is that I really got to know the county and really went out to visit different departments and understand how they did their work.
So again, I think the relationship building.
And really knew who, who could I go to have the really, good answers that I needed. Because the commissioners were very demanding, and rightly so, because they wanted to have the information. They also wanted to feel like our management system was really on top of every issue that they were in charge of, which I think for the most part it was pretty good. The other thing though is, and this is something, I looked at the facts, but I also trusted my intuition in trying to really respond appropriately to issues, and at times you had very little time to do it. I remember one of the hardest things that we did at the county was to cut $100 million out of the county budget, and over $50 million was in the social services area, and we had people lined up that were losing services. Those stories were heart-wrenching, but we had to do it. We had to come in with a budget that could be met, and that's what happened. But I did use, it's like you have to be tough, but I also couldn't lose my feeling and my commitment and my passion for this community, which I have a lot of passion for.